What's up, friends? Chad McMillan here, the Mindful Ways podcast. Blessed to welcome Jean Sebastien Cournoyer with us today in a helicopter that seems to be off in the distance, but they seem to be rolling by today, so we'll manage. It's
Yeah,
an active midweek day, but we do what we need to do, and we need to do it, right? So,
yeah.
Jazz, great to have you here. For
Happy
those
to be
who
here.
are unaware, JS is a co-founder and partner of Real Ventures, which is an early stage venture capital firm helping support and finance early stage ventures and entrepreneurs in bringing their visions and missions to life. Very cool, not easy work,
Mm-hmm.
but valuable and important work, right? And
Yeah.
you've been doing this for quite some time. Cool. Also, as I speak over this helicopter, which makes me wonder if it's coming to get me. I wonder if it's coming to get me these days. I'll double check, but we're good. No problems. There's there's active stuff going on outside, but look, we first connected. Hey, whatever's meant to be, we're in it.
Yeah.
How it flows. So we first connected, you and I, so people are aware, at Burning Man,
Yeah.
which forever has a piece of my heart. Special space. And I see you taking a deep breath there too, just like
Mm-hmm.
breathing that magic in. We can drop into some of that and talk about why we feel that way as
Mm-hmm.
well. But we cross paths there, which has nothing to do with any of our professional kind of backgrounds or pursuits or anything like this. And when we first connected, we just really had no idea what we were about, either of us. And so we enjoy that journey and we connect.
Mm-hmm.
And since have found that not only are we in sync, I think on these personal journeys of like growth and transformation and awareness, but we also have some of these other, interesting, mutually aware worlds that we're both in, which is cool. As I was saying to you before we
Mm-hmm.
jumped on,
Yeah.
because I always like to reinforce it that for those who know my journey, sometimes it can feel like quite a solo,
Mm-hmm.
path, and
Yeah.
a lot of staring up at the sky or staring out into the horizon of those reflections of like,
Mm-hmm.
anyone else know what I'm talking about today? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you certainly seem to be one of those who do, and also have been applying that and this work and this awareness of yours into your professional pursuits
Yeah.
and mission and purpose. So all of that said, super cool to have you on, because I'd love to see where this goes for us today. I
Yeah.
know that when we just open these topics up, all kinds of magic starts to just show up and meet us here. And we were having a great catch up the other day, and we just started dropping right into it. And
Yeah.
I went, oh, this can go. And also, there's so many people out there that I know approach me, and I'm curious how they approach you as well. Interested in learning more about these ideas and philosophies and things like this. So,
Mm-hmm.
so welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful to be here. It's interesting. Like ever since I had my transformation, or the first step of becoming aware of my being, of myself, I've been asked to go on a couple of podcasts, and I actually did record a couple of them. And then a week later, I felt like these podcasts did not represent
Mm,
where I thought I was a few weeks later, right? So I decided not to have any of them published, and
mm,
I think this is the first time where I feel like I'm ready to speak about the journey and the learnings and with, like in public. I do it every single day in every interaction that I have with
Mhm.
every person that I talk to, but these are usually one-on-ones or small groups.
Mhm.
But I've never really done it speaking to an audience that's not with me, that I can't see and feel
Mhm.
in that moment. So I'm actually looking forward to this. This is a first for me, so it's exciting.
Well, I hope we do this justice then. No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure whatsoever.
You know,
No
I
pressure.
mean, but I appreciate that, and I think that comes from a place of a kind of a past awareness or vision of the culture in its form. I think when we find ourselves in the work that we do, in
Hmm.
finance and startups, and in entrepreneurship, banking, I think there's a vision of what that should look like if you drew that on
Yeah.
on a piece of paper. Um, and then I think there's like an evolutionary vision as you're in it, and
Yes.
as you learn to look after yourself more going through it, um, and growing, I think, in the strength of what's possible with it. These are things that I've found on the journey. So
Yes.
it's normal, um, I would suggest, to feel like the environment needs to be comfortable enough to even start talking about some of these topics, because the work you're doing and referring to, very progressive,
Mm.
albeit very ancient, right? It's that's the like that's the contradiction, isn't it? These are like historical ancient techniques and similar and like
Yes.
levels of awareness that you're applying to kind of modern, visionary and kind of luminary practice, which is cool. So let's drop into some of that, without teasing
Hmm.
everybody for too long about
Yeah.
what we're referring to. I mean, um, you have embarked on this transformation, for yourself, and you're suggesting the other day lots of meditation and lots of kind of self-love work and lots of
Hmm.
conscious guidance of emerging leaders and things like that. So maybe you could kind of share a bit of your journey of where you were, how you got started
Yeah.
in the work you do, and then how this has kind of evolved along your way, and what it looks like.
Uh, yeah. Uh, so to me, like my life story is that I was a very sensitive kid. And I know this because of the interactions that I had with my mom,
Mm,
looking back and getting her to describe who I was. And a lot of my childhood memories are me being at the hospital because I had deep asthma and a lot of that stuff as a kid, very young kid.
mm,
And for whatever reason, and I don't know exactly why this happened, but I started shutting down to the outside world and I started building an armor around my heart, and to the point where I completely disconnected from it. And I created a life throughout my life in my mind.
mm,
So I made constructs of everything that a human being is supposed to be and supposed to feel. And right. So love to me was a construct, right? So you behave a certain way when you want to be loved and when you want to show someone love.
mm,
But I didn't feel it per se.
mm,
Now, I didn't know that you were supposed to feel it necessarily because
mm,
I was living in my mind. And so that's how I spend most of my life. And now I have a wife and 5 kids. Like I got married at 22 and I have a 23-year-old. I was 23 when I had my son. So,
mm,
um, there were moments in time where I did feel things, but not to the extent that I feel them now. And the there were a few moments in my life where I experienced extreme, I would say extreme stress or extreme difficulties. Like when I in my mid-20s, I was an entrepreneur. I built a couple of companies that both failed. And those were like major failures for me. And at the time, I had not had these types of failures in my life. So that was quite hard for me. But really, like, ultimately, after having checked all the boxes that I had set initially as being, JS, if you check all these boxes, then you should be happy, right? You should be content. After checking all the boxes, a year into it, I realized that I wasn't, and I still felt empty. Like, and there was something missing. And then the realization was, well, look, if you feel this way and you're just realizing it, then that means there's no one in your life that knows. So you don't really have any real friends. The people you have are relationships, but you haven't really been true to them. So maybe that's the thing. Like, you need to start being authentic. And but the idea of being open and authentic with the people closest to me was something that I struggled with because of everything I would have to unpack if I was to do that. So I started being open and authentic with strangers. So that's about 10 years ago. And that's when my life started to change. And because, and that's actually how I ended up going to Burning Man, because through that journey of being open and authentic with people, and it started with, you're having a business meeting and the person says, "How are you?" And instead of saying "I'm good," I would say, "You know what, like, I'm not doing so well this morning." So that opens the door for the person to step in and say, "Really, what's wrong? What happened?" And a lot of times that would happen. And then I would say, "Oh, I picked a fight with my daughter this morning and I feel like I'm a bad dad." And that started creating this safe place, authentic space for people to share with me as I was sharing with them. And I realized that I was good at that. Like, people would open up to me, and I was able to build a lot of meaningful relationships with people based on a 30-minute or even an hour, sometimes an hour conversation. And that led me on the path to start opening up. Now, the difficulty with that and the friction that happened is because I wasn't aware of myself. I had no concept of self-awareness. I built a construct, or my ego built a construct around JS, the authentic and compassionate person. And I started to use that construct to judge everyone in my life that I couldn't connect with, which was basically all the people closest to me and all the people that I wasn't authentic with, of course, right?
Right.
Right. So basically my life started to become like me seeking love and authenticity and compassion through new relationships and worsening my relationships with everyone close to me. So it made my life hell. Like, it was so bad. And then at some point, about 3 years ago, as I was about to go to my first Burning Man, so it was 4 years ago, I was ready to blow the whole thing up. So I was ready to break up my firm, leave my firm. I was ready to blow up my marriage and just start over. And I had been wanting to go to Burning Man for a few years, like a friend, basically a new friend, stranger, at a meeting, at a cocktail party. 5 minutes into the conversation, he said to me, "JS, have you been to Burning Man?" I said, "What's Burning Man?" I didn't know what it was. And he said, "Well, you should go because you communicate like you're a burner." And that's the authenticity and the vulnerability that I brought to the interaction from the get-go, right? And which is, to me, a big part of what Burning Man is people shed their ego, they shed the stories, and they show up as themselves with much more vulnerability and less fear about being judged. And the burn creates that environment, which creates the opportunity for much deeper relationships and interactions. So through serendipity, really, I saw a month before the burn, I saw a good friend of mine, and I told him how I really wanted to go to the burn this year, but I couldn't find tickets. And he said, "Oh, I have extra tickets and places at my camp. Do you want to come?" So I ended up going, and I would say I would look at that first burn as really the first true moment of my spiritual journey. I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't realize that this was a hard opening experience, but it cracked me open. And I still see the people that I did this with, and they keep reminding me about how joyful I was in that time. Right. And I'm only starting now to tap into that joy again. Like I have these moments of joy now that like happened to me that resemble what I experienced in that moment. So that was the first. So that the first heart opening, although it wasn't a conscious heart opening. And then the other thing that was meaningful for me was some wise soul asked me what my purpose was. And I was like, I don't know. Like, what do you mean purpose? Like, he said, well, like, why are you here? Like, what's your reason for being here on this planet? Like, why are you here in this life, in this body? And I was like, I don't know. Like, how do I find my purpose? And he said to me, he said, you find your purpose in the moments in your life when you feel at peace, when you feel joy, when you feel alive, when you feel creative, when you feel abundant, when you feel true, when you feel compassion, when you feel in harmony with your environment. And I was like, okay, there are moments, I mean, I don't have that many, but I do have moments in my life where I felt this way. So he said, go study those, and whatever is happening, the people you're with, the way the thing is happening, like that will give you a lot of, this will show you the path to your purpose. I was like, okay, so I'm going to do that. So I came back from that burn, and instead of blowing up my life, I was like, you know what? I'm going to double down. I'm going to be better, and I'm going to try to make it work with my wife. And I'm going to try to make it work with my partners. And so I kept at it, and things did not get better in my life, but I had an idea of what my purpose was. And really, like I'm going to try to remember the exact words, but like basically the essence of it was, I want that through every interaction that I have with another human being, they get from that interaction what they need to advance on their journey, whatever their journey is. So that was because like the best moments I had in my life were the moments where I was holding space for other people, and I for whatever reason I was saying the things that they needed to hear, not necessarily knowing where that was coming from, but basically I had what they needed, and but that gave me the understanding. Once I could pinpoint the purpose, I was like, well, I know that I am not that with all the people I care the most about, like all the people closest to me, the people at work, my family, like my wife, my kids, my parents, my brothers, some of my closest friends. Like, I am not that for them, and I don't know why. So I went back to the burn, and that's where we met. So we met at that burn, and I went with an intention, and my intention was, to find a solution to this dilemma. So why can I be this amazing human being with strangers and or people that I haven't known for a long time, but I cannot be with the people that I spend the most time with in my life? And I said, I'm going to surrender completely to the playa, and I'm going to be like, basically, I want to be provided people that need me, meaning where I can realize my purpose with them.
Mm-hmm.
I want people who can give me wisdom in figuring out this dilemma, this question that I have in my mind that I don't have the solution for. And I'm going to be radically authentic. And I'm going to go on any adventure that is being suggested to me that is anchored in that principle. And even if it's something I don't believe in at all. Right. So and then at that burn, so I started doing that, and it was magical. Like, I had dozens and dozens of interactions that were so deep and meaningful, where like people would share their secrets with me, and they had wisdom for me that was meaningful about my interactions with my wife and my partners and my kids. And like, it was this wonderful thing. And like people kept telling me how open I was, and how like some people, like, I didn't believe in any of that stuff at the time. Like, people were saying how I had this white aura, and like, but it was all reinforcing this behavior of, dude, like, if you're going to be authentic and vulnerable, then you're going to get what you want. And then one morning, this beautiful couple came to me, and I was just coming back from sunrise. I had not slept, but they came to me and they said, we're going to this camp. And I can't remember the name, but it's a camp anchored in indigenous spirituality. And we're going to go talk to the Great Spirit. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. I don't believe in that, but it's a great suggestion, and it's an alignment. So I'll go with you. And basically what this was is, you show up and you stand in front of a room that has, I don't know, maybe 40 people in pairs, and they stand up and then they pick you. Like, one of them will stand up and pick you, and you go with them, and they channel the Grand Spirit. So they channel some higher self, and they communicate with you. And through that interaction, I was asked to share what my biggest issue was. And so I shared this dilemma with them. And then the Grand Spirit asked me a question. And the question was, if love could be brought into your life, would you stay in this life, or would you start over? And that was a big question for me, because I was still thinking in the back of my mind, like, maybe I should just start over. In December of that year, so that's 2018, that's when I started meditating. After a dozen people told me I should start meditating, I did. And at first it was 15 minutes, and then it was 30 minutes, and then it was an hour, and then it was 2 hours, and then it was like, as much as I can afford to put in my schedule. Because what meditation did for me is it started, like, the first thing that it did for me is help me be in this place of equanimity, where there is no craving, there is no aversion. So where I'm observing, where I can observe myself, right? So this voice in the voices we have in our heads, and in all the thoughts, and like there was some identification that I had with these things. JS is this, JS is that. My relationship with this person, I believe this, I don't believe that. I'm craving for pizza, like all of this stuff, all of these thoughts. And meditation allowed me to separate my core experience to that. So I could now observe that. So at first it was observing the sensations of the breath coming in and out of my nostrils, you
Mm-hmm.
know, the sensations that it makes. And then while keeping in the awareness there, so being conscious of everything else, but focusing on the breath. And then at some point, as I was focusing on the breath, I could see the thoughts, and they were just there, and they were flowing. And by not attaching my attention to them, they would just go away. And I was like, wow,
Mm.
that's magic. Like, I am not my thoughts, right? And then at some
You could
point,
consider them. You could consider them, and then
well, in
release
that,
them, or
yeah, like you can
inventory
basically,
them, or whatever. Right?
it's like watching TV. Like, it's
Yeah.
there, but it's like a flow of stuff. And and at the beginning, like, I wasn't necessarily trying to make sense of it, but it was more like, wow, I am not that. So if I'm not that, like,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not my physical sensations because I can observe them, and I'm not my thoughts because I can observe them, then what am I?
Mm-hmm.
And that practice slowly, like, as my concentration deepened and I could hold the breath for long periods. The book I was using to learn meditation, it was called The Mind Illuminated. They say in that book that once you have enough concentration, you can expand the object of attention, which to me was the breath initially, to your entire awareness. So everything so everything you hear, everything you feel, whether it's an emotion or whether it's just a sensation of your body on the floor, um, like, all of it can become what you focus your attention on.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was able to make that shift, then I realized that I could meditate in the world. And that meditation was just a different form of being. Like, you don't meditate like you go and play hockey. You can actually be in a meditative state all the time. And that's called
Mm-hmm.
presence. You know, people call it presence, people call it awareness. I mean, other people call it love, like or spirit, or there's a lot of different words. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, what it is it's experiencing the world from a place of equanimity,
Mm-hmm.
where you are not being drawn by the whims of what's happening, and you can see more clearly what's happening. And so I started meditating, watching TV while I was driving, in meetings, sometimes when I didn't have to speak, like, in all kinds of situations. And to the point where at some point I started meditating even when I was speaking. So I was trying to stay in that place of observation as I was speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot doing that. And that is still like how I try to be. And basically what happens when you are in that meditative state as you speak is that you're just channeling. Like, you become a channel. Like the stuff that comes out, you haven't prepared for it. You don't think about it. It just flows, and you
Right.
hear yourself speak. And I learned a lot of things through that process. But that, like, starting to meditate, that really changed my life, because with the meditation, I was starting to become aware of myself and the patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So I was aware of the patterns that were showing up in my life and creating suffering for myself and others,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I did a meditation retreat in May of 2019. I did a Vipassana retreat, the Goenka type retreats that I recommend to everyone, because um, like, most people that do the 10-day retreat, they have not meditated before. So, but they come out of the 10-day with a, what I call, awareness practice. So you start with the breath, and then they expand the breath, and then at some point you do body scans. And from that place of being able to do a body scan, meaning you can feel every inch of your body at all times, you can take that into the world, and that sinks you into presence. And then the rest of the journey is just to deepen that presence,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't need to do anything else but to deepen that presence. And but what this so in that retreat, for me, what was great is I was able to experience some of these higher states of consciousness through meditation. So that, the third eye opened, and I was seeing all these visions of these other worlds and other lives, and who knows what they meant. But I knew from that moment that the the psychedelic journey was just a way to open a door to see something,
Right.
and it was meant as an inspiration to do the work.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and so the from there, from that place of really increasing self-awareness and seeing
Mhm.
myself, I started to realize that my consciousness, so whatever I am conscious of right now, so you, this room,
Mhm.
my body, all of it is my world.
Right.
And this world is for me. And for me, what I mean is, like, my experience is driven by an awareness, right? So, like you, for example, you are aware of me.
Mhm.
You are aware of the sounds that my voice make.
Mhm.
You are also aware of the setting of your room. So there's a place in you. There's something in you that is just aware,
Mhm.
and that thing is not necessarily aware of JS per se, but it's aware
Mhm.
of what is in the room without qualifying it, right? So it won't say JS has blue eyes. It will just see it, right?
Right.
It just experiences it. So
Right.
that place of awareness is the, some people call awareness God. They call it spirit. But like the way I look at awareness is like the fabric, right? It's like it's what the universe is in.
Mhm.
So one example is that you could look at Play-Doh, right? So Play-Doh, basically you get some Play-Doh and you can create anything with it.
The putty. Yeah. The
The
putty.
You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
the putty, right? So
Putty, not the philosopher.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that
I'm with
so
you.
so
Yeah.
so that putty, like, now it has limitations, like the color that it has, and so it doesn't have unlimited things you can do. But with the Play-Doh and or the putty and the its own limitations, you can
Mhm.
create anything. Like, you can create a dog with it, and then
Mhm.
you can create a cat with it.
Mhm.
Um, but ultimately, it is still Play-Doh. It's still putty.
Mhm.
So even if it's a dog, it's also putty. So the way I look at awareness is awareness is like putty, and the universe is the dog that you create with it. And that is constantly changing, right? So that awareness at the center of my experience is the same awareness that is at the center of yours.
Right.
But there is a layer on top of it, which is the universe. But in the context of our lives, it's our egoic mind, right?
Mhm.
So our egoic mind is the avatar that is shielding this awareness from knowing that it is awareness,
Mm.
right? And that's the spiritual
Interesting. Yeah.
path. So the
It's an
spiritual
interesting take.
path
Yeah.
is for the awareness that is in each of us to
Mhm.
realize it is awareness. That's it.
Mhm. Just to show up and observe, basically, and create from that, even, I guess, create from that place of observation, um, to
Yes.
manifest from that place of observation.
Exactly, right? So it's to realize that we are the container of the universe.
Right.
So that the universe is a part of us. It's our creation. It's a manifestation of who we are,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like JS is a manifestation of awareness,
Mm-hmm.
but I am not JS.
Mm-hmm.
And and for me, meditation, and as the deepening of it, that's what it does for me. So it creates a distance between JS. So the more of the patterns that I see that make up who, like the JS, the JS identity, like JS
Mm-hmm.
has a lot, you know, I speak in the third person, but like
Yeah.
I still feel like I'm JS, but I just want to make the point, like
Right.
there are a lot of identities there. There are a lot of beliefs. There are a lot of attachments.
Right.
And as as I see them with awareness through meditation or in the world as well, once I see a pattern, then that pattern is no longer in my subconscious,
Mm-hmm.
and it's now part of my consciousness, and it no longer creates friction for me. And once I've seen this pattern in myself, then I see it in others as well, and it doesn't bother me. It doesn't trigger me anymore. So a big of the big patterns that I realized for me is that I used to lie a lot,
Mm.
but mostly unconsciously. So lying meaning, you know, I'm judging you right now in my mind, but I won't share it with you
Okay.
because I don't want to hurt your feelings. But I'm still judging you, right? So by judging you and not telling you, I'm lying to you. And I'm
I
lying to
see.
you because I don't want you to judge me, or I don't want you to feel bad. But
Right.
you are feeling that judgment,
Right.
right? Because a thought is the same as spoken words. Like it's just there. It's all energy.
Right.
So that's a lie, right?
Right.
Now, some people lie in like in plain sight, like Donald Trump, for example. Like he just lies
Right.
and he doesn't care, right? So
Right.
now people get offended by that. They look at him and they say, "Oh my God, he's lying," and they get offended by it. But to me, when I look at Trump, like 3 years ago when he got elected, I
Mhm.
took issue with his lying
Right.
because I wasn't seeing that lying in myself.
Right.
And now that I see it in myself, I'm no longer triggered by it
Mm.
because to me, he's lying like every other human being. Like we're all lying is part of who we are because
Mm.
we think of ourselves as human beings, but what we are ultimately is spiritual beings.
Mm-hmm.
So even that is a lie. That original thought of I am human is
Mm-hmm.
a lie as well.
Hmm. Conversation that's being had right now with respect to what does it mean to be human, and you know, are we alone in the universe and these types of things, and if we aren't, you know, are they human also, things like this. This is a thread of conversation that I've picked
Yeah.
up on that I've also found fascinating. But to touch on the Trump world, um, where we alluded to the other day, um, an example of an amplified mirror,
Yes.
I would suggest, right?
Yeah.
Where it's
So
triggering,
yeah.
but then also the opportunity to deliver a message that helps us, you know, reflect internally on ourselves and what patterns that may be similar that we could be embodying also. I think that's an opportunity, right?
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. So that's a like
because he's there till he isn't. He's serving that role until he isn't. You and I didn't particularly put him there, but somehow he's placed there as source to do what, right? And what are we meant to learn by that? And how do we grow through that? Is a question I ask myself, and I've
yeah.
suggested we can ask of ourselves in these types of circumstances, right?
Yeah. Like to me, like I simplified it to like in the context of the self-realization path
Mm-hmm.
to whatever I experience is friction in my consciousness. So in my bubble, whatever is friction, and friction can be an emotion, it can be a judgment or a blaming, it could be um, this desire to lie, right?
Would you qualify it as a discomfort? Like,
Yeah,
does it come
it
up
could
as a
be a discomfort, like
inclusive of discomfort, but do you qualify it as a discomfort kind of exclusively as an opportunity to identify it when you talk of friction.
Yeah,
Um,
like to me, it's anything that takes me out of peace.
Fair. Okay.
So so I try to be in that inner peace place,
Yeah.
and every time I'm triggered somehow,
Hmm.
then I know that there is something in me that I'm not aware of that
Right.
is creating that experience for me in my outer consciousness.
Hmm.
And I don't need to understand what it is. All
Hmm.
I need to do is become aware of it and acknowledge it and then accept it. Right. So now accepting sometimes is hard, like accepting that I am a liar.
Hmm.
That was hard for me to accept.
Hmm.
But once I surrendered to it, then it healed, right? Like I
Right.
cried for hours because the tension that karma that lived in my body that was attached to it was released.
Hmm.
And I felt the sadness that comes with me lying is not honoring myself, right? Like, why do we lie? Like, we lie because we don't want to be judged, right? We're
Hmm.
afraid to show ourselves.
Hmm.
That's why people lie.
Hmm.
So every time I lied in my life, I I did not love myself
Hmm.
enough to expose myself, and I created separation with myself.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of sadness there,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So being able to do that, and and that's hard, like especially with the people, some of the people closest to me that where I have a lot of triggers, like I
Hmm.
struggled sometimes to basically take responsibility for the friction, for the
Right.
triggers.
Right.
But I've done this hundreds of times, and it is always the case for me that
Hmm.
when I'm triggered, it's because there is something in myself that I'm not seeing.
Right.
So that has become a rule by which I live now. And
Hmm.
I think that rule is one of the most important rules, first principles of the spiritual path, so that we don't get into the situation of, you become a spiritual leader and you start building an ego around that, and then you
Hmm.
experience a lot of friction. Like, I don't know if you watch the teleseries, the Osho one.
Hmm.
So Osho is a great spiritual leader
For
that
sure.
taught
Yeah.
love,
Yeah.
and they build a community in Oregon, and I highly recommend it. It's on Netflix for anyone on the
Hmm.
spiritual path, because
Hmm.
it basically shows how the egoic patterns can show up at any time on the path.
Hmm.
And so you have to be vigilant. And one way to be vigilant is basically to say, look, this is my bubble. Like, it's my universe, and everything in it is a signal for me, right?
Hmm.
It's all about getting awareness, which is the center of my being, to
Hmm.
awaken to itself.
Hmm.
So I need to take all of it as a signal, a message for me. Because if you don't do that, like, you can have situations like Osho, where yes, he has great teachings, but that whole thing, like, completely, like, it became a clusterfuck
Right.
because there was a lot of ego present still
Hmm.
in that environment somehow, right?
Hmm.
So, and I think that that's also one of the risks of psychedelics is, if psychedelics become your path, what happens is you have these peak experiences where you experience God consciousness, and in that God consciousness, you realize everything, but then you come back and the ego creates constructs around what it learned,
Right.
and then these constructs become the lens with which you experience the world, and these constructs are not awareness, they are not God.
Hmm. Interesting. These are great takes, JS. This is like I appreciate the work you're doing in this realm. I mean, it takes radical ownership
Yeah.
of your experience and swallowing that, really, right? To just receive everything that's coming at you, message wise and otherwise. I mean, I would argue that everything is a message. So when you
Yes.
find yourself still in this place, you're quiet enough to hear them. And if you're coming to them from the place that you are doing the work that you're doing, you're also open enough to receive them, even if they trigger you, even if they make your whole body vibrate or shake or
Yes.
tremble or,
Yes.
right? Because they do, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I often use, surfing and the waves as an analogy
Mm-hmm.
because the waves keep coming. So the work is how we navigate the waves. Do we just take them in the face? Do we duck under them, until we find the right wave? Or do we um, align ourselves appropriately to get up on the wave and ride them, right?
Yeah.
Um, we're meant to do all three, right? But at first, I think the catalyst is that you're just taking all the waves in the face, right? I think that tends to be a catalyst of going, something's not aligned, right? And I'm curious about why I keep taking all these waves in the face. So you start to do the work to explore,
Yeah.
how you're party to that and how
Yeah.
you participate in that, and how you can improve your relationship with that, right? Because the waves keep coming, just like the messages do, in all
Yeah.
shapes and sizes, and you know, um,
Yeah. And
in
as
means and with intentions and purposes, right?
yes, and as as I've taken responsibility for these patterns that exist in me and the suffering
Mm-hmm.
that it causes me and others, and I've openly taken responsibility, meaning, you speaking with my business partners and speaking with my wife and my kids and
Mm-hmm.
owning how I have been with them and the impact that that has had on their lives. I free myself from these patterns. And what happens then is these patterns are no longer there. So I get to see the world more clearly. So I see more of the messages, right? I get
Mm-hmm.
closer to the source and I become more aware of the world and the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
So at first it's limited to my experience with someone, but then at some point, like it's starting to happen now to me, is I can see the system. So I see the family system, I see the system at work, I can see system in society when I can actually see the patterns
Right.
that I've healed and how that pattern or how these systems are evolving. And I can start to predict like what's the lesson that needs to be learned here and
Mm-hmm.
what's the suffering that will continue to happen on the way to the wisdom being acquired by all the people involved in that system,
Right.
right? Because ultimately, like that system is awareness through the avatars, like all the people that play into that system, that is pushing the system to get to a point where awareness can awaken
Mm-hmm.
more and understand itself more and see itself more.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the way the mystics describe reality is, you have awareness and then you have the universe. And, the ultimate human experience is to be the awareness that is aware of the entire universe and all of its movements,
Right.
right? That's the capacity, but it starts with becoming aware of your breath
Right.
and then becoming aware of your thoughts. but the journey up is all the way up to God
Mhm.
consciousness. Now, I have not experienced that, right? So I'm this is a story I'm telling,
Right.
but it's a story that's based on what I've read about how mystics that have done the full journey talk about the experience of reality.
Mm. And it would take great stillness,
Yes.
right, to receive on that kind of level,
Yeah,
I
but
would
it's really
suggest.
like, but it's a mindset, right? So let's say you had realized, or you create a story for yourself that, like, your life is not about what you accomplish in it. Your
Right.
life is meant to help you awaken to your
Right.
true nature.
Right.
Then you can turn everything into an opportunity to learn, right? So,
Right.
like, I had this interactions with my partners at work last fall, where I sat down with them and I said, look, I want all of you to sit with me, 9 people, and I want you to tell me what your experience of me is and how it make you feel. And I'm going to sit there and I will not judge you for it. I will, like, this is a gift for me.
Hmm.
And so we did that for a couple hours.
So how did that start? Did everybody kind of look at each other around the room and go, "Oh boy,
Yes.
who wants to go first?" Right?
And then, like, that's how it started. So
Yeah.
like, they were all like, well, wait a second. But then one person said something,
Right.
and and I think that was like, JS, like, I hear about other people come to me and say what happened with JS, like, he's so spiritual and he's like a guru, like, how can you be a partner with him?
Mm.
So that was the first thing, which wasn't really about her, but still, that broke the ice. And then the other guy says, JS, I'm scared of you. So I was like, okay, like, wow. And then, like, for 2 hours it went on, like, and they keep going at it. And it was such a gift
Right.
because
Sure.
I learned so much
Yeah.
about some of these patterns that were still in me
Hmm.
that I wasn't aware of. And like, my relationship with these beautiful humans has dramatically improved as a result, because their experience is true. Now, it's true in their bubble, but it is their experience of me. So I mean, they're not making this up. And being able to treat it as that, to not take it as a criticism, but taking it in as a learning,
Hmm.
is beautiful work. And that's why, like, in my life, the decision that I've made is to stay in the fire. So even though my work environment was very difficult for me,
Hmm.
I chose to stay in it instead of leaving,
Hmm.
so that I can learn from it, because
Hmm.
it's a beautiful mirror for me.
Hmm.
And I've learned immensely for it, like, from it. It's crazy, and I'm still learning. It's
Hmm.
this beautiful thing. Same with my wife. Like, my relationship with my wife was extremely difficult for me,
Hmm.
but it was difficult for me because I was never truly authentic with her. So I
Hmm.
created all these constructs. Like, my wife is like, it's my mother wound. Like, it goes all the
Hmm.
way down to there.
Hmm.
And you know what? Like, she has decided herself to stay in this relationship as well, right?
Hmm.
And go through all of this suffering, and then the awakening, and now the other suffering, as all of the stuff that I hid comes out, right? Like,
Hmm.
her realizing that she spent her life with someone that really wasn't true to himself. Now, I wasn't,
Hmm.
I didn't mean to lie to her. I didn't mean to manipulate her by not being authentic, but ultimately that's what I did, right? And
Right.
but she chose to stick with me, and we're working through it. And it's like, I'm learning from her every day, because I still get triggered every day.
Hmm.
But every time I get triggered, it's something that I'm holding on to. It's something that limits my ability to awaken to my true self.
Hmm. I'm going to give you a note, at least, that make sure that in your reflections of your past,
Yeah.
um, to still be gentle with yourself, in
Mm,
that you don't know what you don't know, right? Until you know it.
yes.
So it was a necessary part of your journey,
Oh
right?
yeah.
To bring you now here.
Yes.
And it's great that she's holding space with you in this and growing with you in the continuance of um, this journey you both share.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and not blaming you for that, or you know what I mean, not putting any sort of projection necessarily onto that. I think that's I think that's great to hear,
Yeah.
because that's the fear, isn't it? Isn't that part of the fear of authenticity and being authentic, is the potential for rejection or otherwise in the vulnerability? I think that's a thing. I think that I see you maybe freeze again, but if you're still with me.
No, I'm here.
Yeah. Well, then you're very still,
I am.
which I respect. Yeah. I feel that that's a thing. That's part of a block. I'll reflect on that myself, on where that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where that sourced that observation. But it's nice in your path that's being received that way. And it's really interesting to hear your integration into the boardroom
Yes.
uh, with these approaches and philosophies.
Yeah.
Because when I also started on this path of shifting and listening and shedding and learning and observing, the work, I also got a lot of that comment reflected from, an entire industry, and and still do, in different degrees. It
Mm-hmm.
affects me differently now. I released it at the time because I was operating true to myself. So you know, that it's coming is uncomfortable, but for me, there was nowhere else, to go. This is it. So if it's not accepted, it just, in my surroundings, it's a strong reflection, but there's nowhere for me to go, because this is actually me, shedding some of these layers and exploring, right? So it was like,
Yeah.
it was bumpy in that, and it still has its times and occasions, and I can be perceived that way, and it's a real thing. But I feel more authentic now than ever,
Mm.
and there's more work in that regard to do for me as well. But once you start, right, I feel that you're tuned in, and I feel that it's so rewarding doing the work. It just, there's a great joy and peace and comfort in growing through this, this work
Yeah.
and on this path, that it adds a lot of value, to
Mm-hmm.
yourself and others and the world in doing it, right? So um, it's very cool. It's very
Yeah.
cool. I respect your journey.
Thank you.
There's something on the tip of your lips there. What would you like to share?
Well, what I've learned, and this has been my experience, is that when I when I experience friction with someone else by being or by like sharing my journey or by being spiritual or by trying to guide them,
Mm-hmm.
there's friction there.
Mm-hmm.
It is because I am attached to something,
Sure.
right? So so the and I think that's in part why I have not done any public speaking to talk
Mm-hmm.
about this topic, because I feared that I like whatever I would communicate with people would not meet them necessarily where they are,
Mm-hmm.
which is ultimately what I want to do. I want to meet people where they are so
Mm-hmm.
that they can make their next step on their path.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me, that has been something that I feared I would not be able to do in public, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm learning is that even if now, I want to be very careful about the way I say this, because like ultimately, I think that we all get, through the experience of life, we all get where we're supposed to get to make the next step.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we may be aware of it, sometimes we're not. And if we're
Mm-hmm.
not, then it keeps showing up until we become aware of it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the message gets louder and louder in our consciousness, in our life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I try not to judge myself too much. Like the way I described my past, like I'm able to say that without feeling bad, because like ultimately it is true.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to own it allows me to free myself from it,
Mm-hmm.
able to help someone else also free themselves from how that pattern is showing up in their lives. And if I try to make excuses, well, then I haven't really freed myself from it. And I'm still judging myself for having been that, for having behaved that way. So when I speak with people, um, and that's something that I've become better at, is I just try to be and listen
Mm-hmm.
and just hold space and be present with them, and then trust that whatever they need to hear will come out.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, if and whatever they need to experience, they will experience. So if there is friction in the interaction, then I will know that there was a pattern present in me and in them that needed to be healed in that moment, and that their role in that interaction was to serve me, to see that pattern, and me to serve them in seeing the pattern. Now they may get frustrated, they may say things about me, they may do whatever, but that's okay. It's just part of that process. And I just have to trust that there's a much higher consciousness, pure awareness, you may call it, or God,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
has just engineered this thing and it's just unfolding. And I'm just a pawn in it,
Right.
and all I have to do is do my best and have the best intentions, and and go with it and own the friction, right? Like, because I could just say, oh, like, that's like, he's not ready, his consciousness is so and so, and not look at the trigger, the friction, as something that I own.
Mm.
But the moment you own that friction, then, like, that is behaving in harmony with the type of consciousness that I want to inhabit, and it becomes a learning experience.
That's cool. As within, as without, I'll say, which is
Yes.
it's a dance, external
Yes,
and internal.
it is.
You know, you're co-creating.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then, like, you talked about integration in the boardroom earlier, like, it's really about integrating this mindset into every moment of your life,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you don't have identities, you're just the same one person.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've realized, and there was fear in that at the beginning, is that a business environment, you can still bring truth in a business environment, and vulnerability and compassion
Mm-hmm.
and abundance and all of these words, radical openness, like all of these things can exist in business, and they do not impact negatively financial success. They actually reduce risk, like they reduce the team dynamics, right? Risk, and it creates more harmony and flow. People use
Mm-hmm.
that word flow, where
Mm-hmm.
you can have groups of people working together towards a common goal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, flow is about higher states of consciousness, right? That's what flow is about. If you
Mm-hmm.
can create flow in a business, and that business can be in harmony with its community, in harmony with its customers, its suppliers, its
Mm-hmm.
shareholders, the planet,
Mm-hmm.
nature, like that business would be the most successful business in the world that the world has ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that the entrepreneurs and the companies you're working with, I mean, you're actively, are you still?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I'm very active. I'm working with about a dozen companies
yeah,
right now,
yeah.
and I'm gonna. One of the things that I want to do is like I'm taking some time. So I'm remaining a partner at Real, but I'm gonna free up some time to work with other entrepreneurs that we're not investors in,
Mm,
and really my intention there is to work with entrepreneurs that are building or leaders, so the companies could be a little bit more mature, but work with people who want to realize their higher self,
mm,
and want to live in harmony with it in every aspect of their lives.
mm,
And I want to support them in that journey.
mm,
And really the way I work with entrepreneurs now is really it's two end of the spectrum. So there's the, all right, let's have a vision for the world,
mm,
right? Let's have a vision for my place in that world. Who am I? Like when I when I die, how do I want people to talk about me?
mm,
Right? Not from the things that I've succeeded at, but more how was I like?
mm,
Was I peaceful? Was I compassionate? Was
mm,
I vulnerable and honest and open? And
mm,
so you paint a picture of the vision of yourself
mm,
and the vision of the world.
mm,
And then from there you build your mission statement for a person. So how does that version of you manifest
mm,
in all of your identities? So how does that manifest as an entrepreneur, if that's what you are, or as an artist, if that's what you are, or as a husband, or as a parent? But then your creation, the company, well, what's the mission of the company? And make sure that mission of the company is in alignment with your own personal mission and your own vision for yourself and for the world. And then from there, what are the values and operating principles for you and for the business? So what
mm,
are the rules of engagement, like the way you serve, that need to be monitored and need to be honored for you to realize the mission and the vision,
mm,
right? And then how do you apply these to every aspect of the business,
mm,
every aspect of your life? So, every business process, every strategy you have, the way you treat customers, the way you treat suppliers, the way you build product, like
mm,
all of that stuff, right? So that's one way. So that, and I call that more of the top down way.
mm,
So it's like creating a new belief system
mm,
that is in harmony with this higher self of yours.
mm,
But then the other is just to say, all right, we've got an issue, we got a problem. I'm struggling with my board. I'm struggling with this person. I can't communicate
mm,
with them. And then I will bring the love perspective, the awareness perspective, and
mm,
I'll say, okay, so let's assume that the friction you're experimenting, you're causing it somehow.
mm,
Now, I'm not saying you are, I'm not saying you're wrong, but let's just do this exercise of self-awareness.
mm,
So look into yourself for this thing that you're seeing in the other person. Like, can you get there, right? Like, try to be peaceful, and then I'll get people to think about what their fears are, what their needs are, like what their judgments are of others, so there's a lot of self-awareness work,
mm,
but then applying it to business situations. And so I have a number of entrepreneurs that I work with who wouldn't say they're on the spiritual path, but they have started to use these love principles in their business,
Mhm.
and they're getting great results. So they want more and they're doing more.
Mhm.
And that works too, right? So I want to be able to serve the entrepreneurial mystic,
Right.
um, or the guy who just wants to build a great business and have fun with it and be happy and have a great impact in the world, and not
Mhm.
end up building a business that society will judge in the future, because it like a Facebook, for example, that is doing great stuff, but
Mhm.
there's also a lot of byproducts that are not so good, that
Yeah.
I am convinced Zuckerberg, when he started the business, didn't think of Facebook being bad for humanity in any kind of way.
No, I would agree with that. Yeah.
But he didn't ask himself the question
Yeah.
of what the potential impact could be.
Right.
And had he asked himself that question, or had one of his board members suggested that to him, well, then he would have had a different level of awareness
Hmm.
in how he was making decisions, and maybe incorporate a bigger stakeholder group, or the collective, in thinking about what the impacts of that the company could have on humanity.
Right.
And that's all I want to help entrepreneurs do, right? But
Difficult, difficult with a large company like that, that kind of grows at the rate they did and brings on, quite a diverse shareholder base and things like that. Would you suggest, not to like necessarily delve into like that whole world, but I would say that carrying that flag as companies grow, it's great when it's in the early stage to seed those principles,
yeah,
but trying to apply them later on can cause, let's stay on theme, you know,
yeah,
can can reveal friction for sure because of the different principles of your shareholder base. Uh,
yeah.
I would suggest, right? It presents some challenges probably.
So the way I see it, uh, and this is a story, but I'm sort of looking at it through the lens of my own experiences.
Mm.
Like, I think, or the human experience. So I think if you have a child who is yet to live in the world, become awakened, well, that's probably a lot easier to do, right? It's probably a lot easier to awaken a child than it is to awaken an adult.
Right.
That child has yet to build interactions with the world, and he is
Mm.
yet to create suffering. But the awakening of a child, like the impact of that, is different, because yes, that child, like, you can have an enlightened child, and that child would impact the lives of the people around them, but their impact in the world is not as big, because they're not involved in a lot of constructs of social institutions, all right? So they're not an NBA star, or they're not the CEO of Facebook, or so it is easier, but the impact is not as great. Like,
Mm.
when you look at an adult, like if you look at the example of my life, for example, like,
Mm.
my transformation is forcing some form of transformation into all of my relationships.
Right.
Like, I'm forcing people to react to me in a
Right.
way.
Right.
And now, so the impact is a lot bigger than if I had awakened as a child. Now, if I had awakened as a child and lived my entire life enlightened, then of course my impact would have been bigger. And I think
Mm.
that's why it's important to work with. I want to work with entrepreneurs starting businesses, because if one of them is building the next Facebook, and he lives from these principles, then the impact on humanity will be massive.
Mm.
That being said, if the leader of one of these massive companies has an awakening and chooses to not change his life, so to not go in the mountain, but to actually transform his business and use it as a force of good, the impact that would have on humanity would be massive.
Right.
And I would love to support someone on that path.
Mm.
And like you look at we've been talking about Facebook, but Facebook has made enlightened decisions in its history. Like one, for example, was to not get into dating as a business model.
Mm.
Now that decision was a decision based on creating future value, right? Because if you limit yourself to dating, then you're limited to that market, and a
Right.
dating platform would struggle to become a marketing platform.
Right.
But still, like, there was an enlightened decision there that
Mm.
enabled Facebook to become what it is today. But there
Mm.
could have been another decision, which could have been, you know what, like, I've studied Freud and consumerism, and I've realized that what marketing and advertising is really about manipulating human behavior.
Right.
And I wonder if that's ethical and that's right, and where that leads society.
Mm.
And what is the ultimate business model for something like the platform that we have?
Mm.
And I'm convinced that, like, there's a different business model for Facebook that is not advertising.
Mm.
And like, now I'm not going to say exactly what it is. Like, there is no point, but
Sure.
there
All right.
there is there is a like, because imagine if Facebook was about helping people awaken to their
Mm.
true nature.
Mm.
Like, people would pay money for that.
Mm.
People would pay a lot of money for that. People pay, like, there's billions of dollars being spent on personal growth.
Mm.
So all of that could have been funneled through Facebook.
Mm.
And maybe that is a bigger market as society evolves. We have COVID now that brings a lot of stress to people. Like,
Mm.
maybe that market is going to be massively bigger than the advertising market,
Mm.
right? And maybe Facebook could be a $10 trillion company instead of a $500 billion company.
Mm.
But that's the point, right? So my point is, the point I'm trying to make is, I think you never lose anything
Mm.
by investing in self-awareness.
Mm.
And that we will see the evolution of society where there will be companies, and there already are some, that are bring some of these principles to, in the way that they build their business.
Mm.
And that there will be a transition, and that we will see, um, like, we will see a capitalism that is more in harmony with the entire planet and creates abundance for all.
Mm. So there's a lot of friction
Yeah.
out there right now. There's a lot of transformation, a lot of reflection
Yes.
through COVID and all of this. Like, it's showing us a lot of inefficiencies, right? Probably the best
Mm-hmm.
word, about how we're all operating and collaborating and working together, where we
Mm-hmm.
are, where we aren't, strengths and weaknesses and what's possible.
Yeah.
I tend to agree it's a catalyst through this for us to reconsider a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's for us to paint necessarily that entire picture from this conversation, but it's the seed that's sown, it feels to me. It just, for my part personally, it's definitely mirrored a lot of things back
Yeah.
that I should see
Yes.
through this experience this year. Um, which is then acting as a catalyst for me, which is then bringing people like us together, to have
Mm-hmm.
conversations like this and, share these ideas and spread awareness and, and so on and so forth. And now you're not just pulling this out of the sky either. As a co-founder of Real, as an
Yes.
example, to qualify some of your perspectives here. Um, You've invested with your group over 200 early stage companies,
Yeah, over
um,
the years.
and over like 300 million approximately, like under management, give or take,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So like, you know, those who know, and those who don't know now know that you guys aren't just in your garage tinkering with mousetraps, though that is the spirit for
yeah,
sure, right? I
yeah,
mean, that is the spirit, but that's not, you're not pulling this just out of the sky. These are trained and astute observations of that world as well, and it's very cool to hear them
mm.
through this lens of awareness as well.
Well, look, like ultimately, the world that we live in right now is the world that was dreamed by other human beings that came before us.
Right.
So, like, we are the makers of our society, of our humanity, of our world.
Yeah.
So, all we have to do to build a different world is to shift our mindset, and then that world will get built.
Mm.
We just have to do it.
So let's touch on that maybe a minute without painting the whole thing, but let's
Yeah,
touch on that, in this thread here. I think it still adds value and it's important. What areas these days kind of, themes, trends, and similar, do you feel we should apply more attention to? And maybe as a dovetail on this question, what suggestions do you have for, you know, the future leaders and the up and coming leaders and, early stage entrepreneurs
yeah,
who are in their garage listening to this right now, um, maybe burning some sage with the quartz crystal in the corner, but at the same time spinning around this mousetrap going like, what is my purpose? And, you
yeah,
know, what are we going to do? And, how do I contribute in a meaningful way through their visions to the world and with the
yeah.
world? What are your thoughts on some of those questions?
Sure. It's a
They're
great.
valuable. They're valuable. I feel
Yeah,
they're
it's a great
completely in
question.
sync.
Like, so to me, when I look at our society, and I'm going to give you a long-winded answer, so please bear with me.
Bring it. Holding
Um,
space. I
to
appreciate it.
me, like I look at our society, and there's a lot of great things about it. Like the condition of most humans living on the planet are would make kings of the 16, 1700s like die with envy.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of great things about humanity and the technologies that we've built and the constructs, the social institutions we've built. And but the reason why I think, and I'm starting to experience that we live in a world that has so much, right? There's all this greatness to it, but then there's also all this friction, like this all these like, why are there still a billion people that are starving? Why are there still, a billion people that don't have any money to live on, right? That are living on like a few dollars a day. Um, why do we have so many people dying of cancer and diabetes and heart attacks where these diseases are behavior based diseases,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we just have to change our lifestyle to not have them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so these are all things that are hard to explain, right? And
Mm-hmm.
my story is that our world is like that because of our consciousness, because of our egoic fear-based consciousness, because we
Mm-hmm.
believe that we are humans that are separate from everything else,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't see the unity that we are ultimately as awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, like we don't have to build new technologies or new things or invest in spirituality per se. Like all we have to do is change our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to bring back or bring in a a moral framework of some kind that is tied to some of the mystical traditions, not religion per se, but more getting people to ask themselves, who am I really? Like deep self-awareness, and not just as a mind experiment, but as a deep stillness, sitting in meditation type experience. What am I? So how does who am I manifest in the world? And then how do I serve? Which is the operating principles or that moral framework that I use to experience the world in my moment to moment experience. And if people do this work, like ultimately what happens is it all is relatable to what, things like love consciousness or like Buddhism and the deep, really what the mystical traditions talk about. So stuff like compassion and kindness and sympathy and authenticity and vulnerability and openness and responsibility and all of these words that defines way of being, the how we are in the world come to light. That's what people want to be. So let's just continue to do what we're doing, but by applying these principles to them. So let's not throw capitalism in the garbage, but instead let's apply this different perspective to it and say, okay, so how does capitalism evolve from where it is now with these principles?
Mm-hmm.
How does a technology company evolve with these principles? Mm-hmm. And I think if we start doing that, and we don't need to do that at society scale, we can do that one company at a time. We can do that one community at a time. We can do that, one social institution at a time. We can even do that one person at a time. Because once that starts to happen, once one person in an environment start behaving that way, the whole thing changes. Because you cannot not change as a result. Because like by being true in an environment, you force the truth in that environment. You force everyone to be truthful.
Right.
There's no other way, because like love is more powerful than fear.
Mm-hmm.
Like love eats fear for breakfast.
Mm.
And that's because fear is like fear does not exist in love. So what I invest in, and I think that's the way Real is also evolving, is less about, like, I'm interested in deep tech, because I want to invest in societal shifting companies.
Right.
But that's just my personal interest.
Right.
The thing where Real and I are aligned is the way to build these companies. So how do we support entrepreneurs to be true to themselves as they build their company?
Mm.
To me, that's the role that we play at Real, and that's the role I want to play. Is I want to be there side by side with an entrepreneur who's like, you know what, I don't know how to do this. I'm scared shitless to do this, like to bring this type of framework or morality or love into building my company. Mm-hmm. But it feels right and I want to do it. Then I want to be there to support them on that journey, so that they have the courage to make the next step. And it's one step at a time, right? Mm-hmm. But that's what I think is the most important thing that's happening in business now. I mean, there's a movement called conscious leadership. Mm-hmm. that people use, and I would look at conscious leadership as sort of that's the entry level, right, of bringing more of that, all of these words that I've used, that we've used over the course of this interview, this conversation.
Right.
But there's a great book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. There's another one called The Meaning Revolution. And both of these, and there's many others, but those are two that I've read. And these two, like they sort of give you tools
Mm-hmm.
to start behaving that way.
Mm-hmm.
And these are consultants that they're earning a good living, and they're big companies that are dabbling with these concepts right now.
Mm.
And
Experimenting and exploring how to
they are, right.
apply them and integrate them and similar.
Yeah, because like,
Mm.
why not? Like, if you can build a company that is completely harmonious with the collective,
Right.
I mean, why not?
Right. Yeah, it's a high vibrating achievement if you can pull it off for sure.
Yeah. and
There's no
and
doubt.
and it's it's hard, but then it's not. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example of a large one. If you look at let's say Apple.
Mm-hmm.
So Apple makes phones, and they've done a great thing, I think, recently to help elevate self-awareness of the people who use the phone by sending you this report every week about how many hours you spend on the phone every day. I don't know if you have that feature or not. So I get it every week, and it tells me how many hours I've spent on my phone every day.
Okay.
That's a great way to get me to be like, wait a second, like, should I be spending 12 hours a day on my phone?
Right.
Probably not. Now, they don't judge you, right? They just point it out to you, right?
Right.
So to me, that's a great feature. But another thing that Facebook could do, like these phones that they make them, like, a lot of them are being made in manufacturing companies that don't treat their people so well.
Mm.
And these manufacturing companies, they use like metals, and it's unclear. Like, there's a lot of stuff being said about how these metals are mined, and that
Mm.
maybe children are involved, and maybe there's
Mm.
slavery involved. Like, now, I don't
Right.
know if any of these things are facts or not. I'm not saying they are,
Well, whether they're facts today or not is a question in some regions and places,
yeah.
but that they were the case is certainly, I don't think that's
But the point I'm
true.
making is, if Apple today, because Apple
Right.
today is the most valuable company in the world,
Right.
and they have hundreds of billions of dollars on the balance sheet. They're super profitable. So if Apple today said, you know what, we're going to be radically responsible for our impact on humanity,
Mm-hmm.
and they basically said, we're going to use a portion of the money that we make, or that we've made, to treat every single person that touches our product
Mm-hmm.
the same way. So whoever mines the ore
Mm-hmm.
will get paid proportionally what someone who helps make the phone proportionally in living in San Jose makes.
Mm.
Like, that would be a blip for them. Like, it would
Right.
increase, like, it would reduce their margins by very little,
Right.
but it would start, like, the shift that this would have, that we are responsible for our footprint.
Right.
Like, imagine if they started doing that, the impact that it would have on capitalism. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
would radically change. And that's not like, it's a money decision. It is a taking responsibility for not being like that, right?
Right.
Of course. But
Right.
still, like, it's doable. Apple would not die as a result.
Right.
Like, their stock price may dip a little bit, but then it will go back up because everyone would want to use their product because they could trust them.
Right. Be quite the ripple.
But ultimately, that's what this is about, right? Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
just about being true and owning your bullshit.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And we all
Yeah.
have this
At a
bullshit.
micro, at a micro and a macro level,
Yeah,
right? At an individual and a collective level.
yeah. So I don't
Yeah.
know, maybe I'm an optimist, but I think it's happening. Like, and I'm I don't know if I will see it in this lifetime,
Right.
but I'm going to contribute to it. And all I have to do is continue to work on myself. So deepen that self-awareness, that realization of being awareness path,
Mm-hmm.
and then continue to be in the world in the highest vibration or consciousness that I have access to. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I'm not, learn from it
Mm-hmm.
and own it.
And share it,
Yeah.
you know, share it and help seed and integrate it elsewhere where appropriate, you
Yeah.
know, as well. That's awesome. It's great. It's so great, man. It's so great to hear this story and journey and these inspirations and, you know, the focus of your work and how you're just seeding and sharing these insights and helping others grow and develop with them, you know, with them imbued in their paths as well. It's awesome.
Mm, thank you.
It's awesome. Um, we've been going at it here, diving into this stuff. It's terrific. I'm sure, um, you know, our viewers and listeners are really going to dig this conversation. Is there anything as we kind of tie it together? We can always revisit and come back and circle around and not too long and all that good stuff. You know, and unpack some of these ideas some more. But you know, is there anything else you wanted to share, kind of in tying it all together, wrapping up our chat a little bit,
Yeah.
giving
Um,
people to know we're here?
maybe I can share what has worked for me and what have sort of become the first principles of my experience. And
Sure.
they, these may resonate with people or not. And, you know, and if they don't, that's perfectly fine. Like, I think we all have our own bubble, our own
Mm-hmm.
universe, our own realm,
Mm-hmm.
and we are the masters of that realm.
Mm-hmm.
And what works in one place may not work in another.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but like this notion of I am not JS, but I am this awareness or this spiritual being that experiences like all of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is something that at the beginning for me was a belief and then turned into a realization. And now
Mm-hmm.
the rest of my journey is to deepen that realization, right? So I've not realized that I'm awareness completely, and I have not realized that I am the universe, but the realization is deeper than it was before. And to me, the only way to truly get on this path for me, right, was the meditation. So it was to change my experience of my moment to moment experience
Mm-hmm.
to be from that place of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And and to get there, you need concentration and equanimity. So you need concentration and the peace to not react to what's happening in your life and be able to
Mm-hmm.
observe it. So you can detect friction when there is, and or you can be in flow when you are in flow and
Mm-hmm.
be at peace and remain at peace. So I deeply I highly recommend a meditation practice that becomes something you take in your moment to moment experience. And you can call it presence, awareness, whatever it is. But again, to me, meditation is not something we do. Meditation is something we are.
Mm. It's a big point. That's important. Yeah.
So now it's not something we are at the beginning, but it's
Mm-hmm.
something that we work on at the beginning so that we can be at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And when you become meditation, then it's done. Like, because everything just happens, right? It naturally deepens. And then it's combining that with the moral framework, which you could call love consciousness, or which is all these words, compassion and vulnerability and truth and responsibility. And for me, the most important one of all of these that I'm keeping and I'm holding on to is radical responsibility.
Mm.
So it's this notion that every moment of friction I experience, every triggering moment
Mm-hmm.
is a learning experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
It is not about the other, it is about me.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, there is wisdom for me to acquire if I can see the pattern that is in me that has created this experience. And when you combine that, which is really, I mean, you could look at that as shadow work, right? Because it's is looking deep into yourself. So combining that with the investment in presence and awareness, like these two things, in my view, is these are the first principles of the path. These are the two things that people need to get all the way there. And they're like, so you know, there's so it's not a lot of stuff to remember, right? And
No, they're strong pillars. There's no doubt.
there's strong pillars, right? So
Yeah.
so if there's only two things that you get out of this interaction is
Mm.
ready to sort of make this to do this work, like investing in these two things, I think is really great. I would say the other point I would want to emphasize again is that, like, because things have been going on a certain way doesn't mean that they can't change, and they can change if you change. Like, you don't have to worry about what other people are doing or what the world is doing. Or what I've realized through my experience is that all I have to do is work on myself, because ultimately I am my consciousness.
Mm.
So I am everything in my consciousness. So if I show up in my consciousness as love, then every interaction that I have with my consciousness will be love. And as a result, all of my interactions and the other people or the systems that I interact with will become more love as a result.
Mm.
So we can build the world that we want. We just have to be true to ourselves and have the courage to show up as something that people may not be expecting, or something that the world isn't at this time. But that doesn't mean that the world can't be that,
Or won't
right?
become that.
You know, it's like,
I mean, isn't that's the spirit of early stage, isn't it? Like if
yes,
you see something that isn't yet, and you see something that 10 years from now could be,
yeah,
that
like
maybe no one's thinking of,
the
or
internet did not
right,
exist like 25 whatever years
right,
ago, and now
right.
it's everywhere in our lives. These phones, we didn't have them. Like, the iPhone came up in 2007.
Right.
Everywhere, billions of people are on Facebook, like on Instagram. All these things did not exist. Now
Yeah.
you could say they're technologies, or they're things that people do, but why can't you do that to a way of being?
Right.
Like like no one says you can't do it,
Right.
so just do it.
Right. You are it, be it. From that, that will
It
have
just
its impact, and
happens.
that will roll, and yeah, it will connect, and collectively will evolve that way.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're headed also. I mean, it's part of why you and I are here and having this conversation, but it's also, yeah, we're just picking up those vibes as much as we're doing this work. We're picking it up. It's in the air, right? Play Alchemist, tip our hat to them as, the camp how we met, and what a great example, right, of a
Yeah.
space where a number of people are coming together from all over the world to connect and
Mm-hmm.
share ideas like this and explore them and bring them back to wherever they came from. you
Mm-hmm.
know, awesome, man. This has been a great chat. I think we've really dove in and explored and revealed and shared and offered some value to viewers and listeners today that I feel they can take away, and tip their hat to you for the insights and wisdom. So thanks for being here, brother. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it, and I'm like I said, this is the first public thing, so I don't
Yeah,
know if your listeners comment your work, but I'd love to hear feedback and not just the positive feedback, like some of the maybe the friction that people have experienced as well, so that I can learn from it too.
yeah, for sure. Well, I'll be happy to share that. And
Beautiful.
you'll have a small window here. If people are viewing and listening this, it means you went to sleep tonight and you woke up the next day and still felt good about sharing everything you shared. So you have a window. Um,
No, I'm
to
good
bear
actually.
down.
You can go with it.
Thank you kindly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel it's outstanding. It's terrific insight, and I greatly appreciate it. So we'll circle back. We'll do this again. Once all this has had time to marinate and explore how these ideas, and experiences have evolved for you, and carry on. And you and I will keep the conversations going off to the side in the meantime, anyways. I'm sure. So it's great, man. JS Cournoyer, uh, Real Ventures, a wizard, awakening, doing amazing things, raising the vibration around the world, and helping the next generation of leaders, and even this generation of leaders, provide deeper impact and affect greater and greater change, while at the same time growing and evolving on his own path. So thanks for being here again, brother. Hope you all enjoyed it. We'll be back again with some more mindful ways, insights, and wisdom as we flow and go. But this has been awesome, inspiring, and I thank you again, and we'll chat with you all soon.
Thank you.